What is up, Steelers Nation? Time for a little revenge game. We got Steelers, Browns, 1 o'clock Sunday, twice in a 3-week stretch. Schedule's been weird this year, man, but this one's gonna be played at home, Acrisure Stadium. Excited about that. Pittsburgh's got the opportunity to take a 2-game lead in the AFC North. Baltimore is on a bye. Just a little over a month left to go in the regular season, man. Honestly, that kind of saddens me a little bit because I feel like time is just flying by so fast. It feels like the regular season's just gone by so quickly. Trying to savor these previews, savor each week as much as I can, but just keep you guys posted on like the playoff picture. Currently the 3 seed in the conference, behind Kansas City and Buffalo. Gonna be interested to see like how the rest of this month kind of plays out. They do have Kansas City here in a couple weeks on Christmas, so they're gonna have an opportunity to kind of take them down, take them on. That'll have playoff seeding implications, I'm sure. Don't play Buffalo this year. Buffalo's kind of rolling. Their schedule's fairly easy as well. So it's going to be difficult to kind of hop into one of those first two seeding positions. But getting a home playoff game, I'll continue to say it. It matters so much on Wild Card Weekend. It would be a huge bonus if they can hang on to this lead in the AFC North and be able to host come Wild Card Weekend. So just if y'all could do me just a quick favor, please make sure you like the video, subscribe, hit the bell. All that stuff is greatly appreciated on my end. And just also don't forget, be sure to drop your comments. Just give me your predictions for the game as well. Always enjoy, going through and reading those before the game kicks off on Sunday. Let's get started with some injury notes for the Steelers. They're really healthy, man. Like this is about as healthy as they've been in quite a while, maybe all season long. The only player declared out in this one that's not on injured reserve is Montravius Adams. He was declared out with the knee injury. Sounds like it's probably going to be like another week for him. It'd be good to get him back into the fold. Now, there was some big injury news late in the week. George Pickens is listed as questionable with a hamstring injury. Our good buddy Alan Saunders, our beat writer over at SteelersNow.com, said that George was incredibly limited at practice. Didn't do very much on Friday. Of course, really just kind of depends. I don't really know what all that's going to entail. We'll see how much he does during today's walkthrough Saturday as I'm recording this. If George can't go, that would obviously be a huge blow to the Steelers' chances in this game. Before the season, I actually wrote that I thought that Pickens was their most important player on offense. Usually that's kind of reserved for the quarterback just because of the nature of the sport and just how things work in the NFL. But in the Steelers case, I really thought that he was their most important piece. I thought he was their most talented player. Still believe that. I actually think you could probably make a case that he might be their most important player on the team in general, just because nothing against, TJ Watt, Cam Hayward, even probably better pure players than Pickens, but they've got guys, especially behind at the edge rusher position, Nick Herbig, those guys that can kind of step in and kind of do some really good things. They just don't really have a lot of talent, a lot of weaponry on the outside at his receiver spot to where I'd feel comfortable with them kind of having to step in or kind of funnel this passing game, without him. And you just look at George's impact this year. Just one of the stats that I was looking up, just as I was kind of prepping my notes for the preview. So George Pickens against man coverage this year, specifically cover one. So NFL teams like your high cover one rate teams are, around 30%, but that's really the main, you don't see a ton of cover zero in the league. Don't see 2-man very much. Teams that play man coverage is usually some variation of cover one. Pickens against man coverage this year has the second most receiving yards among wide receivers. And he is averaging, this is an absurd statistic. He is averaging over 3.5 yards per route run against cover one this year. That's how dominant he's been. Pretty much anytime he's been pressed out on the boundary, one-on-one, Russ or Justin giving him a chance to win, and he's done it time over time. He's been one of the just purely one of the best receivers against man coverage this season. He's been nearly unstoppable. So that's kind of impact how dynamic he is with the ball in his hands, how difficult it is to cover him, especially on those deep shots down the boundary, are why you kind of put up with some of the antics and some of the other stuff. So if he can't go, that's a huge deal. I'm hoping that he's going to be able to. Pray for that into existence. So as far as the Browns, they are a little bit more banged up in this one. You've got some guys on IR as well that I won't really mention, but Mo Hurst, their interior defensive lineman, he's out with an ankle injury. Cedric Tillman still dealing with a concussion. You're going to be seeing probably some Jamari Thrash, I would imagine, out there on the boundary. we'll talk about kind of the Browns personnel usage. They're kind of leaning into some more two tight end stuff anyway. But no Tillman, he was, really having a pretty hot stretch there about a month ago. Juan Thornhill, one of their safeties, is questionable in this one, and then Jedrick Wills is out with the knee. So it's going to be, I think, German Ifedi again at left tackle. We saw him a couple weeks ago in this matchup. It feels kind of weird to kind of preview this game twice in 3 weeks. So I'm not really sure. Like a lot of the stuff I said in the last 2 weeks ago's preview is still pertinent information. A lot of the stuff that I'll refer to kind of in this video will really just be like observations. I went back and watched that game again earlier this week. Really just observations from like how that game went and some of the things that I think are really noteworthy, that could potentially carry over to this one. But, the Browns offense, they ranked 22nd in EPA per play, 19th in success rate, really since Jameis Winston entered the lineup. And not that I'm like, a Deshaun Watson guy by any stretch of the imagination, but also like it should be noted that like Jack Conklin kind of came back around that time. The offensive line just played better in that stretch. And I think that Jameis deserves credit for, them at least being a watchable offense. And of course, they beat the Steelers a couple weeks ago, so they deserve to hang their hat on that as of right now. But nothing has changed really about like the type of quarterback that Jameis is. Really, since we broke this down, or really just since Jameis came into the league, I think he's done a good job, getting the ball out quicker. He deserves credit for that. And I think that one of the things that he did in the last matchup against the Steelers that was really, crucial to them coming away with the victory is like he made some just like out of body experience type plays outside the structure of the offense. Like Jameis is not a scrambler. He made several plays like outside of the pocket in that game. That was huge. And I thought that, just some of the throws he was able to make, even he ran in that one down in the low red zone area. So those plays out of structure are not typically his game. He made them. You got to give him credit for it, but I'm not going to like overreact because I just don't see that happening twice, to be honest with you. But Jameis, he is what he is, man. You're going to get a lot of A+ plays. You're going to get a lot of F- plays. He's going to push the ball down the field vertically. He's going to take a ton of risks. Under pressure so far this season, you just look at some of the numbers. He's completing just 44% of his passes. He has 7 turnover-worthy plays on just 76 dropbacks. That's a ridiculous number. So kind of like what we saw the last time out, like he's going to give you opportunities to get interceptions and things like that. But the Steelers, converted on those chances last time around too, and they didn't end up winning the game. So there's more to it than just that. But, Jameis, he's going to probably have them moving the football a little bit. Like he'll make some good throws, kind of like what we saw against Denver. That's a good defense that they played last week. He moved the ball, but he still threw, multiple interceptions, a couple that, either went to the house or could have went to the house. So, Jameis is just Jameis, man. It's just what you get is what you get. So their rushing attack hasn't been very dynamic all season long. This offensive line is taking a step back. They did have a rushing success rate of like 50% the last 2 weeks ago when these two teams met. Now, a lot of that was really just there was a lot of quick passing game in the early sequences of downs. So he threw the ball a lot on first downs, a lot of quick game stuff, get the ball out quickly of Jameis's hands, especially in the first half of that game. The only sack that the Steelers ended up getting in that one was actually that strip sack from Herbig. So, that was a huge play in the game, but they didn't. I mean, they pressured Jameis a little bit. He made some plays outside of the structure of the offense that were really nice and beneficial to Cleveland, but they've got to get more than one sack on this one, full stop. I mean, we understand that definitely has to happen. The Steelers pass rush had a pretty solid game last week. Saw TJ Watt get back on track. They'll get Alex Highsmith back in this one. Highsmith, which is worth talking about. And I say this mainly is because I wrote a lengthy column on Nick Herbig for Steelers Now earlier this week, which I'll leave the link to that in the description of the video if you guys want to go read it. But basically, it was just me laying out my thoughts on I think that Nick Herbig is like a star. I really do. I think he's that type of special of a pass rusher. I think he's a star pass rusher in the league. But I don't want that to get misconstrued in terms of that I think Alex Highsmith is like a bum or anything like that. That's definitely not where I'm coming from with this. I just think that the Steelers are really lucky because they have 3 really good pass rushers at the most important position on their defense. But you just look at Highsmith's numbers, when he's been out there this season, they've been pretty phenomenal, man, to be honest with you. I mean, he's only really been able to play in about 6 games. Of course, he didn't even finish, I think, one of those. But you just look at the numbers. I mean, he has 18.2% pressure rate. That's fantastic. He has 13 quick pressures. He's still getting off the ball extremely quick. His time to pressure 2.58 seconds. He's had some really, really quick wins. And then this is a matchup that also, like, just on paper, he should absolutely dominate. So while I really appreciate the things that Nick Herbig's doing, and I wrote about in the column different ways that they can get all three of those guys on the field at the same time early in the season, they kind of experimented with some 3 edge sets. I think that they'll probably try to go back to that. Maybe not as much in this game, but definitely you'll see it some, depending on down and distance and just game script and things like that. But the Steelers have something pretty special, but I don't want to just like kind of not mention the fact that Alex Highsmith is coming back is like no big deal. Herbig was phenomenal in his absence, but like having another dynamic pass rusher that can win those one-on-one opportunities, it's a blessing. It's honestly an embarrassment of riches. And a lot of teams are really envious of like the situation that the Steelers are going to find themselves in. So, but just in terms of the running game, man, like they had a lot of success, throwing quick throws underneath, but they didn't really do a ton rushing the football. It was a lot of like second, third, and short type of runs where they were just, moving the chains. But this isn't Buffalo or anything like that where they're going to be able to like really get after you with the power run game. They do run a lot of gap stuff. Just at one of the higher rates in the league, but nothing too concerning there other than the fact that the Steelers haven't defended the run extremely well over the past like 6 weeks. It's a trend that's at least worth monitoring, even though I'm not sure that this is a team that's necessarily going to be able to take advantage of that. One dude who has been going off has been Jerry Jeudy, 614 receiving yards since week 8. It's actually leading the entire NFL since that point, which is actually just hilarious on so many different levels. Some of that production is, the Jameis tax, as I like to call it. And also, them kind of just shamelessly targeting our old pal Levi Wallace in that Broncos game when he was forced into action due to injury. But this is a team that's actually been playing a little bit more 12 personnel in recent weeks, something I mentioned a little bit at the start of the video. First play of the game against the Broncos, they ran this little like play action toss play out of the gun, hit Jerry Jeudy on an end breaker. That resulted in an explosive play, I think like a 44-yard catch and run. And then they hit him on a deep post later in the game where they went into kind of like a max protection, isolated him one-on-one. He was able to get loose over the top. Jameis does throw a pretty good deep ball. So that's just some of the things. Like if they want to throw the ball down the field, and that's something that Jameis is very comfortable doing, they like to use like max protection looks out of that. Jeudy did make some really clutch catches in the game 2 weeks ago, especially in the snow. They did some things to kind of scheme him open, getting him in some stacks and things like that. Just kind of makes me wonder, is like this a Joey Porter assignment? And if so, like is Porter, he's due for kind of a bounce back game. Of course, called for 6 penalties last week. Was a ridiculous number, but I think that Porter's like mentality is right, and that's not going to affect him or anything like that. I'm expecting him to bounce back. Just curious on if they're going to play more man coverage, or is this more of like a zone heavy game plan again on third downs? Jeudy does play a lot in the slot, so that's something to monitor. Like you're going to see him matched up against guys like Cam Sutton, Beanie Bishop. We already kind of talked about on the live stream earlier this week about just kind of the distribution of labor and things like that. Of how those guys, snaps are kind of playing out. But speaking of guys that I think like really need like kind of revenge in this game, TJ Watt, I just kind of assumed, honestly, when he was, a ghost a couple of weeks ago against the Browns, I thought they just doubled him a bunch. It was like, whatever, it is what it is. But actually, you go back and watch the film, they honestly let Jack Conklin kind of go one-on-one on an island with him more than a dozen times. Watt just couldn't beat him, man, to be honest with you. But I will say this, and I don't want to make excuses because I'm not that type of person. But I think the necessary context there is that in the elements, in the snow, it's not necessarily ideal for a speed rusher that's out there like trying to capture the corner every play. When TJ was trying to attack him with power, it didn't go well, but that's not really how he wins, right? Like we know he's a speed rusher. He's a finesse guy. I still think TJ needs to be a little bit more varied in his pass rush plan. You saw last week, they started moving him around the formation a little bit more. I don't know why it took till this point in his career to like at least try it and see what happens. We've seen very little of that over the years. We'll see if they actually stick with it, or if this is just kind of like we're just going to throw it out there and just whatever, scrap it after 2 weeks or something like that. But I do think that being a little bit more varied will help him. So Conklin just doesn't sit on that outside shoulder the whole time, just try to push him up over the arc. He's going to have more favorable conditions. We'll call it that. My bold prediction last week on the podcast for the Steelers Now, folks, is that I thought he would get 2 splash plays against the Bengals, really have a nice bounce back game. He did that, made me look smart. I really appreciate that, TJ. I think he's going to have a similar effect on this game. I think he'll have another good one, especially after all the talk that was going on afterwards. And hey, like I always say, like you win, you deserve to talk trash. Myles Garrett, he won. He had a big game. He talked a bunch of trash post game. Now they got to come to Acrisure Stadium. I'm expecting TJ to be a little more amped up for this one than usual. So I'm excited to see him get his get back a little bit. So, where I think the Steelers have to be much better offensively is kind of a good segue to the other side of the ball. Myles Garrett just ruined the game last time, to be honest with you. Still true this time around. Like, you have to find a way to block this dude. You have to find a way to contain him, not let him wreck the game. It's really that simple, man. I thought the execution of the plan was actually worse than the plan itself. Dan Moore can't block that dude one-on-one. Very few can if you don't give him any help. So he was just far too disruptive, especially in the first half. 3 sacks. Some of the avenues that I think they had at their disposal last week to kind of negate Hendrickson aren't really going to be there this week. The check downs, the Browns do a pretty good job defending running backs, defending check downs, screens, things of that nature, whereas the Bengals off-ball linebackers just don't have enough athletic ability to do so. Teams don't run a lot of play action against the Browns because of Garrett, and they just don't feel very comfortable with those types of plays. Now, I will say this, too. Like, the Steelers have to do a better job picking up stunts up front. I thought Zach Frazier and Isaac Seumalo both really struggled with this. They ran a lot of, like, TT, so tackle stunts, especially on passing situations. It just didn't go well for the Steelers. So they got to be ready for that. I'm sure that Jim Schwartz is like that circled on the game plan, that they're at least going to try to kind of pick at that a little bit early in this game, just see if the Steelers have adjusted. Hopefully they have. Where I think the Steelers have to be much better in this one is running the freaking ball. Cleveland is like middle of the pack in terms of like rushing success rate on defense. But the Steelers finished this last game 2 weeks ago with a 30% rushing success rate. It's just not good enough, man. Like, it's just not good enough, flat out. Something that really dawned on me recently is just like how bad the Steelers run game has felt like anytime they've actually had to get under center. So I looked the numbers up just to kind of confirm if that was like bias or, if that was actually correct. And like, yeah, like it's pretty bad. Like, they're averaging 3.5 yards per carry, despite the third most attempts under center. None of their zone rushing concepts have been like super reliable. Mid zone, outside zone to the strong side, anything like has been super productive. They are a bit better about running the ball out of the gun, though. They're averaging 4.7 yards per play, despite like not really being able to have the threat of a mobile quarterback back there in the gun. It kind of takes some of the zone read stuff out of the equation to an extent. I do think that you'll try to see them spread out this Browns defense a little bit in this one. The first play, I think, of the last matchup was a little trap play to Jaylen Warren that popped for like 15 yards. Problem is, Arthur Smith kind of fell in love with it a little bit too much. They ran that play like 5 or 6 times in that one. It wasn't like overly successful. They didn't really have anything going in the run game. So point blank, I think they got to control the line of scrimmage a lot better in this one. But they've got to be more balanced for sure. I think the pass game, the Browns' approach in the previous matchup was a little bit different because they played almost exclusively zone coverage. I think 6 snaps a man. If you recall, Pickens caught that moon ball early on the right side of the field. He ends up winning the one-on-one against Denzel Ward, who's still having a great season. He wins that one-on-one, and then after that, it was like they're just going to play a lot of zone, and that's just what happened. I will say this. Schwartz, typically a guy that likes to play a ton of single high. They will play cover 3 as well, about 30% of their snaps or so. His changeup is the cover 2 stuff. They run a lot of NTT, so non-traditional Tampas. What they'll end up doing is they'll show like a single high shell. Pre-snap, they'll roll the safety typically to the strong side, but they will do it both sides. And then they'll have one of the corners kind of pop back in an inverted motion and kind of take the deep half. Now, I've said this on the podcast. I've said it on here, every medium, I think, over the last couple of years. I swear they're not very good at this stuff. They do it more than like any other team. I just don't think they're very good at it. Last week against the Broncos, Bo Nix drilled like a 90-yard touchdown right up the pipe because they're in one of those NTTs, and Denzel Ward's just like a half inch away from breaking up the play, but he dives at it, can't get it. Marvin Mims takes it to the crib. So there's explosive plays to be had. Like, cover 2 invert is a really risky coverage, and like if you can get a beat on it, like especially when they start showing some of the tendency stuff and down in distance, like you can hit some explosive plays on it. So really interesting. I thought Russ caught him in a couple split field coverages. They came back to a couple plays late in that game. Calvin Austin, that touchdown grab that he had late in that one was actually a repeat play call from early in the game. He actually missed Calvin over the middle. They came back to it. They played a little bit more cover 6 in that game as well. So I'm curious on like if they have a good game plan for that stuff. But I was actually somewhat encouraged by like the way that Russ played down the stretch in that one, especially in the second half. I thought he made some dynamic throws, especially like in the conditions. I'm not expecting anything like that at Acrisure this coming weekend. But I'm interested to see, what the game plan looks like. I am totally expecting the officials to be on high alert, especially with like Pickens, Newsome, all the trash talk that's going on throughout this week, just everybody involved in this one. But AFC North Showdown, I'm expecting a pretty physical game. I'm expecting a lot of trash talk. I'd be shocked if they didn't call this one super tight. So especially after the play's over, I have no issue at all with trash talk. In fact, I love it. I think it's good, but can't have the penalties, stuff like that. Arthur Smith talked about it a little bit this week in his press conference. You love the passion. You want guys to compete and play to the whistle and all that stuff. And I think that the Steelers offensive line has done a really good job of doing those sorts of things. It's just, can't have the post-snap penalties at all, especially in this one. So, the Steelers, I've been looking forward to this game for, 2.5 weeks now. I know it didn't sit well in the locker room, losing that game, especially everything that, kind of went with that. I expect that they're going to be pretty ready to play on Sunday, especially. So this is a really good opportunity for the Steelers. You've got basically 5 weeks left to go to, find your stride right heading into the playoffs. Playoff seeding implications on the line. This is a game they really need to have, especially at home. You can't get swept by the Browns, man. That's just like it's a code. You just can't do it. So I'm not anticipating that happening, though. So I really appreciate you guys tapping in with me on these previews. Just before you forget, on your way out, please make sure that you like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, drop me your comments. Let me know what you guys think is going to happen in this matchup. I'm really excited. 1 o'clock game, so there is a chance, depending on how the game goes and like just my workflow and all that stuff, that I'll actually be able to get the recap up Sunday night, if not like early Monday morning. But I will keep you guys posted on that. Of course, if you have the bell ring, you'll be notified when I post that. So I appreciate you guys. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Peace and love.